My name is Athena Sinclair. I'm 31. 3 months ago, at my sister's wedding, in front of 150 guests, my parents demanded I hand over the penthouse I inherited from my grandmother, a $2 million penthouse, as a wedding gift. When I said no, my father slapped me so hard it knocked me off balance. I stood there tasting blood with every person in that room staring at me. Nobody said a word, so I wiped my mouth, picked up my bag, and walked out. That's when a black limousine pulled up to the reception entrance. And when the person inside stepped out, my father's face went white. He looked like he wanted to run. Before I tell you who was in that car, please take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if you genuinely connect with this story, and drop your location and local time in the comments. I love knowing where you're listening from. Now, let me take you back 6 months to the day my grandmother's will was read. My grandmother, Margaret Sinclair, was the kind of woman who could walk into a room full of men in suits and walk out owning the building. She started with nothing: a cashier's job at a hardware store, a GED, and the kind of stubborn faith in herself that most people only talk about. By the time she was 50, she owned 3 rental properties and a penthouse downtown. No inheritance, no husband's money, just her. I spent every weekend of the last 3 years of her life driving 2 hours each way to sit with her. 2 hours through rural highway, past cornfields and gas stations every Saturday morning without fail. We'd drink Earl Grey on her balcony, the one that overlooked the downtown skyline, and she'd tell me about the years she slept in her car, about the first property she bought with cash she saved in a coffee tin under her kitchen sink. She never pied herself. She never asked for sympathy. She just built. And when the world told her a woman alone couldn't own property, she bought 2 more just to prove a point. When she passed, the grief hit me like a wall. But the reading of her will hit even harder, just not for the reason you'd think. The attorney's office smelled like leather and old wood. My parents, my sister, Aunt Grace, and I sat around a long mahogany table while Grandma's attorney read the document aloud. The penthouse held in a revocable living trust was designated to one person, me, Athena Sinclair. My name alone. No conditions, no shared ownership, no ambiguity. I looked across the table. My father, Richard, sat perfectly still. His jaw was tight. My mother, Vivienne, dabbed her eyes with a tissue she'd been twisting for 20 minutes. And my sister Brooke, 27, freshly engaged, already eyeing the penthouse photos on her phone, stared at me like I'd just stolen something from her hands. Nobody said congratulations. Nobody said Grandma would be proud. When we walked to the parking lot, I heard my father lean toward my mother and say quiet enough that he thought I couldn't hear, "Don't worry, she'll give it up. She always does." I pretended I didn't hear it. I wish I hadn't. I should tell you something about my family. There's a pattern, and once you see it, you can't unsee it. When Brooke graduated high school, my parents threw her a party with a live band and a catered dinner for 60 people. They rented out the back patio of the country club. There were personalized banners, a photo booth, a 3-tier cake. When I graduated valedictorian, top of my class, scholarship offers on the table, my dad said, "Good. Now go get a job." Party, no cake. My mom made frozen lasagna that night, and we ate in silence while Brooke texted her friends about prom. When Brooke went to college, they paid every dime: tuition, housing, the sorority fees, the spring break trips to Cancun. When I went, they told me I was on my own. I took out $60,000 in student loans and worked 2 campus jobs to cover the rest. I ate ramen 4 nights a week for 3 years. I didn't complain. I figured that's just what independence looked like. When I got promoted to vice president at Meridian Property Group at 29, the youngest VP in the company's history, I called home to share the news. My dad paused, then said, "Must be nice to have no life outside work." No congratulations, no pride, just a jab about the thing that made me successful: my dedication. When Brooke got engaged, my mother threw an engagement party at the country club. Champagne towers, monogram napkins. When I closed on my first apartment 3 years earlier, I invited the whole family to celebrate. Nobody came. My mom texted later, "Sorry, honey." Brooke had a hair appointment. I'm not telling you this so you'll feel sorry for me. I got used to it. You do eventually. You learn to celebrate quietly. You learn to stop expecting. But my grandmother, she saw all of it. Every missed birthday, every excuse, every time they chose Brooke and left me standing alone. She'd squeeze my hand on that balcony and say, "They don't see you, Athena." But I do. 2 weeks after the will reading, my Aunt Grace, my father's older sister, sent me a text message. Just one line: "Don't give in. I know things they don't want you to know." I stared at it for 10 minutes. Then I put my phone down and went back to work. 3 months before the wedding, my mother called. I was in my office halfway through a contract review when her name lit up my phone. I already knew what was coming. I just didn't know how far they'd push it. "Athena, sweetheart." Her voice was honey-coated, the voice she uses when she wants something. "Your sister's wedding is going to be beautiful. You know what would make it absolutely perfect?" I closed my laptop. "Mom, the penthouse as a wedding gift for Brooke and Derek. They'd have a real home to start their lives in. Your grandmother would have loved that." Grandma left it to me, Mom. That was her choice. Silence, then the tears. You're so selfish, Athena. You always have been. You sit in that big apartment all alone while your sister struggles. How do you sleep at night? I offered alternatives. I'd pay for their honeymoon. I'd give them $30,000 in cash as a gift. I'd help with the down payment on a different place. Anything reasonable. She didn't want reasonable. She wanted the penthouse. A week later, my father called. No honey voice, no warmth. Your grandmother would have wanted this. He said, Grandma left it to me, Dad. That was what she wanted. Family takes care of family. I offered to help. You turned it down. I'm not talking about help. I'm talking about doing the right thing. I am doing the right thing. I'm honoring her wish. Long pause. Then his voice dropped. Cold, controlled. We'll see about that. He hung up. I sat there in the silence of the penthouse, and I could feel it, something shifting beneath the surface. He wasn't going to let this go, and I had no idea yet just how public he planned to make it. Here's the math I kept running in my head. If I gave away the penthouse, I'd lose a $2.2 million asset, not money I earned from a job, something my grandmother spent her entire life building toward. 40 years of work, 40 years of sacrifice, 40 years of being told she couldn't and doing it anyway. The last tangible piece of her in this world. But the cost wasn't just financial. That penthouse was the place where I became myself. It was where I sat with her on Sunday mornings while the rest of the family slept in, where she taught me about compound interest over oatmeal and orange juice, where she showed me her first tax return, $12,000 of income, and she'd saved 3,000 of it, where she told me the last time I saw her conscious tubes in her arm and monitors beeping. Don't let anyone take what you've earned, sweetheart, not even the people who are supposed to love you. If I said no, I'd lose my family. My father would make sure of it. He'd rally every aunt, uncle, and cousin against me. He'd rewrite history the way he always did, casting himself as the reasonable patriarch and me as the ungrateful daughter who hoarded wealth while her family suffered. And most of them would believe him. They always did. So $2.2 million and my grandmother's legacy or a seat at the Thanksgiving table. I sat alone in the penthouse one evening, holding a framed photo of Grandma from the bookshelf. She was 60 in the picture, standing on this very balcony, holding up a set of keys and grinning like she'd just conquered the world. Because she had behind her the city stretched out in every direction, a skyline she'd helped shape one property at a time. That night, while going through a box of her things I still hadn't fully sorted, I found an old bank ledger. Handwritten entries, dates, amounts, names. My father's name appeared over and over. 5,000, 12,000, 8,500, $15,000, spanning 15 years. The total just over $80,000. Not one entry had repaid next to it. At the bottom of the ledger, in her shaky handwriting, one sentence, Richard asked me to change my will again. I said, no, the penthouse is Athena's. Period. I closed the ledger. My hands were shaking, but not from fear. My father launched a campaign. Over the next 2 months, I watched him dismantle my reputation inside our family, one phone call at a time. He called every relative we had, aunts, uncles, cousins, second cousins, people I hadn't seen since I was 12, and told them all the same story, his version. Athena took everything Margaret left. Won't share a penny with her own sister. You know how she is. Always thought she was better than the rest of us. The text messages started trickling in like poison. My Aunt Diane, your parents sacrificed everything for you. The least you could do is help your sister, my cousin Paul. Kind of selfish to hoard a whole penthouse when Brooke's just starting out. Don't you think? A great aunt I barely knew. Margaret would be ashamed of you. That one cut. Because it was a lie, and they had no idea how much of a lie it was. I wanted to fight back. I wanted to forward Grandma's ledger to every single one of them and let the numbers speak. But I didn't because I still believed somewhere deep and stupid that I could fix this without burning everything down. In the middle of all of it, one person stayed silent. Aunt Grace, my father's older sister. She didn't join the campaign. She didn't send a single accusatory text. She just watched until one night she sent me a message. Brief, careful. He's planning something for the wedding reception. I don't know details yet, but don't give in, Athena. And keep your phone close. I may need to reach you. I typed back, What's going on, Aunt Grace? Three dots appeared, then disappeared, then trust me, just be ready. I didn't sleep that night. The wedding was held at Whitfield Estate, a restored Victorian property 20 minutes outside town. White garden arches wrapped in peas, fairy lights threaded through century-old oak trees, a glass-walled reception hall that overlooked a rolling lawn dotted with hydrangeas. The kind of venue that costs more than most people's annual salary. The kind of place where everything is designed to look effortless, even though nothing is. 150 guests, half the town. It felt like relatives, neighbors, church friends, business associates, Brooke's sorority sisters, Derek's college buddies, everyone dressed sharp, everyone holding a drink, everyone performing their version of happy family. I wore a navy blue dress, simple, understated. Brooke had specifically requested no one wear white, obviously. But she'd also told me through my mother, naturally, never directly, not to wear anything attention grabbing. So navy it was. I looked like I was attending a board meeting, and honestly, that felt more appropriate than anything else. The moment I stepped through the garden gate, I could feel it, the shift in energy, the way conversations stuttered when I walked past. Clusters of relatives turning slightly, voices dropping to a pitch just below audible. I recognized the body language, they'd all been briefed. My cousin Paul and his wife didn't greet me. They looked through me like I was a window. My Aunt Diane made brief eye contact from across the cocktail table, then looked away like she'd accidentally glanced at something unpleasant. Even some of friends, people I'd never met, seemed to glance at me with something like preloaded judgment. He told them all, every single one, and they'd believed him without asking me a single question. I was pouring myself a glass of water at the cocktail table when my father appeared at my elbow. He was wearing his best suit, silver tie, the charming smile he reserves for audiences, Athena. His voice was warm, public warm. Glad you came. It's my sister's wedding, Dad. He leaned in close enough that I could smell his cologne. Tonight you'll do the right thing. I've already told people. My stomach dropped. Told people what? That you're giving Brooke the penthouse as a gift during the reception. I'm not doing that. He smiled wide and steady. Well, see. He walked away, shaking hands, clapping shoulders, playing the proud father, and I stood there with a glass of water I couldn't lift because my hand was trembling. The ceremony was beautiful. I'll give it that. Brooke floated down the aisle in a $12,000 gown paid for by my parents. Naturally, her veil trailed behind her like a cloud. Derek, her fiancé, stood at the altar looking like he'd won the lottery. The officiant read a passage about love being patient and kind, and I almost laughed. Almost. They exchanged vows. Brooke cried, pretty tears, the kind that look good in photos. Derek's voice cracked when he said, I do. The crowd awed. Applause. Camera flashes. A perfect moment for two people starting a life together. I clapped along with everyone else. During the cocktail hour, I slipped outside to the garden path behind the reception hall. The music was muffled through the glass. I stood under an oak tree and breathed in and out, counted to 10. My phone buzzed. Aunt Grace, he's planning to announce it during the toast. I've made a call. Someone is coming. Stay strong, honey. My fingers hovered over the screen. Someone who? I typed, Grace, who did you call? No response. I typed again, Aunt Grace. 3 dots appeared, then one line. Someone Margaret trusted more than anyone in this world. Just hold on. I stared at the words until the screen dimmed. Margaret trusted more than anyone. My mind raced through possibilities. My grandmother's circle had been small by the end. Me, Aunt Grace, and one other person. Someone she mentioned in almost every conversation about business, about life, about the things that mattered. A name surfaced in my memory, but it seemed impossible that she'd show up here tonight. I pocketed my phone, straightened my shoulders, and walked back inside. The toasts were about to begin. The MC tapped the microphone twice. Ladies and gentlemen, the father of the bride. Applause. My father rose from the head table. He buttoned his jacket with one hand and took the mic with the other. The room quieted. Thank you all for being here tonight, he began. Smooth, practiced, the voice of a man who spent decades running a small town business and knows how to hold a room. Watching my little girl walk down that aisle today was the proudest moment of my life. He talked about Brooke as a child, ballet recital, where she forgot the steps and just twirled anyway. Her first day of school when she cried at the bus stop. The time she brought home a stray kitten and refused to let it go until my mother surrendered and bought a litter box. The audience laughed in all the right places. Vivian dabbed her eyes with a tissue. Brooke beamed, her hand resting on Derek's arm, the picture of a blushing bride. He didn't mention me, not once. 31 years of being his daughter, and I didn't make the highlights reel. Then his tone shifted just slightly, like the air pressure changing before a storm rolls in off the plains. And now he said, I have a very special announcement. Our family has a tradition of taking care of each other, of sacrifice, of putting family first. He turned and looked directly at me. Every head in the room followed. My eldest daughter, Athena, has decided to give Brooke and Derek the most incredible wedding gift, the downtown penthouse that once belonged to my mother. The room erupted. Gasps, applause, people turning to smile at me. A woman at the next table pressed her hand to her heart and mouthed, How generous! Brooke's face lit up. She clasped her hands together and looked at me with those wide, practiced eyes. I always knew you'd do the right thing, sis. My blood went cold. I hadn't agreed to this. I'd said no repeatedly, clearly, explicitly. And my father had just stood in front of 150 people and lied. I felt my chair pushed back beneath me. I was standing before I made the conscious decision to stand. That's not true. The room went dead silent. Okay, I need to pause here for a second because right now I'm standing in front of 150 people. My father just lied to every single one of them, and I have about 3 seconds to decide what I'm going to do. If you've ever been put on the spot by someone who was supposed to protect you, you know this feeling. Hit that like button if you're still with me because what happens next? I still can't believe it happened. The room turned to me like a single organism. 150 faces, half confused, half scandalized. My father recovered fast. He let out a short laugh and gripped the microphone tighter. She's joking, of course. Athena has always had a dry sense of humor. I didn't sit down. I'm not joking, Dad. Murmurs rippled through the tables. Silverware clinked against plates. Someone coughed. I never agreed to give away the penthouse, I said, not shouting. My voice was steady, and I'm still proud of that. Dad decided that on his own, without my knowledge, without my consent. From the head table, my mother stood up. Her mascara was already streaking. See, she cried out loud enough for the nearest four tables to hear. This is exactly what she does. She ruins everything every single time. Vivian, sit down, Aunt Grace said from the back of the room. Quiet but firm. My mother ignored her. You couldn't just let your sister have one happy day. One day that isn't about you. I looked at Brooke. She hadn't moved, hadn't flinched. She sat there with her hands folded on the table and her chin tilted slightly upward. The same look she'd worn every time she got exactly what she wanted by letting someone else do the fighting. My father clicked the mic off and set it on the table. He walked toward me. The charm was gone, and in the chaos a memory surfaced. My grandmother sitting on the penthouse balcony, pointing at me with her teacup. If things ever go sideways, remember Eleanor. Sharpest woman I ever met. She'll always have your back, Eleanor. Aunt Grace's words echoed. Someone Margaret trusted more than anyone. I felt something shift inside me, like a lock turning. While my father advanced toward me, my mind pulled back 2 weeks to a Tuesday evening in the penthouse when I was reorganizing Grandma's study closet. I'd been putting it off for months. Her things were still arranged exactly as she left them. Legal folders, tax documents, a leather portfolio with her initials embossed in gold, and beneath it all a slim cardboard box I hadn't noticed before. Inside were letters, personal ones, and a bundle of bank statements photocopied with handwritten annotations in green ink, Grandma's favorite color. The statements tracked every loan she'd made to my father, dates, amounts. Each one noted in her meticulous script $80,000 over 15 years. Not a penny returned. But it was the note on the last page that stopped me cold. Her handwriting shakier now. This was written near the end. Richard called again today, third time this month. Wants me to move the penthouse to a family trust he'd control. I told him no. I told Eleanor no one changes this document. The penthouse is Athena's, period. I'd tucked the note into my wallet that night. I didn't have a plan for it. I just wanted it close, like carrying a piece of her with me. Her voice, her certainty. Now, standing in the middle of my sister's wedding reception with blood pumping in my ears and my father bearing down on me, I could feel the edge of that paper against my hip through the clutch I was holding. I hadn't come here to fight. I hadn't come here with a strategy. I came because it was my sister's wedding, and I thought maybe, just maybe, one normal family evening was still possible. But the note was there, and so was I. My father stopped 3 feet in front of me. He grabbed my arm, not hard enough to bruise, just hard enough to steer. He pulled me toward the corner near the bar, but we were still fully visible. Guests at the nearest tables watched openly. Nobody intervened. You are going to go back up there, he said through his teeth. You are going to smile and you are going to say yes. No, Athena. I said, no, Dad, that's my answer. It was my answer last month. It's my answer now. His neck flushed red. You think you're better than us because of that apartment? Your grandmother was a fool to give it to you. Something cracked inside my chest. Not from sadness, from rage held too long. Don't talk about Grandma like that. I'll talk about my own mother however I want. She was my grandmother, and she chose me. That's what's really bothering you, isn't it? He leaned in closer. If you walk out of here without making this right, you're dead to this family. You hear me? Dead. Before I could respond, Brooke appeared. The wedding dress rustled behind her like static. Her eyes were red, but her voice wasn't sad. It was hard, demanding. Athena, please? You're ruining my wedding. Your wedding was beautiful, Brooke. This isn't about your wedding. Then just give us the penthouse and it's over. You don't even need it. You're always at work anyway. I stared at her. My little sister, the one I used to carry on my back through the sprinklers, the one I helped with her college essays, looking at me now like I was an obstacle between her and something she deserved. No, I said, it's not yours to take. My father's hand curled into a fist at his side. He pulled me back toward the center of the room. The microphone was still on the table, still live. He didn't pick it up. He didn't need to. His voice carried through the acoustics of the glass-walled hall like a verdict. Everyone, he called out, and the room stilled instantly. Forks stopped midair. Conversations died mid-syllable. I want you all to know something. My daughter, my eldest, is sitting on a $2 million apartment that my mother left her, and she refuses to share a single thing with her own sister. Her sister who's starting a new life tonight, who's starting from nothing. Heads shook, lips pursed. A few older women exchanged disapproving looks aimed squarely at me. A man at table 7, one of my father's hardware store friends, muttered something under his breath. The judgment was instantaneous and collective. Grandma left that penthouse to me in her will. I kept my voice level, measured every word deliberate. It was a legal, documented decision. She made it with a clear mind and a full heart. It's not mine to give away, it's mine to honor. Honor? He laughed, a short, ugly sound that bounced off the glass walls. You don't know the meaning of that word. You've never sacrificed a thing in your life. He stepped closer, close enough that I could see the vein pulsing at his temple. His finger rose and pointed directly at my face, trembling with fury. You ungrateful selfish? The slap came fast, open palm, full force across my left cheek. My head snapped to the side. I staggered, caught the edge of a banquet table, and felt a chair leg scrape the hardwood floor beneath me. White hot pain flared from my cheekbone to my jaw. Something warm and metallic ran from the corner of my mouth. I touched it with my fingertips. Blood. The room froze. 150 people turned to stone. Not one breath, not one gasp, just the suffocating weight of collective shock. 3 seconds of absolute silence. The string quartet had stopped mid-phrase. A champagne glass somewhere was still fizzing softly. That was the only sound in a room built for 200. My mother covered her mouth with both hands. Brooke looked down at her bouquet. Derek the groom took a full step backward. Nobody moved, nobody spoke, nobody stood up. I pressed my fingers to my lip, looked at the blood, then looked at my father. You just proved everything Grandma warned me about. He opened his mouth. Nothing came out. I straightened my back slowly, deliberately, the way Grandma used to when someone underestimated her. I picked up my clutch from the table where I'd left it, wiped the blood from my lip with the back of my hand. My cheek was throbbing. My ears were ringing, but my spine was straight. I looked around the room one more time. 150 faces, some horrified, hands over mouths, some embarrassed, staring at their plates like the answers to everything were hidden in the salmon. Some already composing the version of this story they'd tell at church tomorrow morning. Not one of them had stood up, not one of them had said, "Stop," not when he lied about me. Not when he grabbed my arm, not when he hit me. A 150 adults. And my father struck his daughter in front of all of them, and the only sound was champagne fizzing. My mother sat frozen at the head table, tissue pressed to her mouth, eyes darting between me and my father, like she was calculating which side to land on. She didn't reach for me. She didn't say his name. She sat there doing what she'd always done, waiting to see who won before choosing a side. Brooke wouldn't look at me. Her gaze was fixed on the floral centerpiece in front of her, her jaw tight, her fingers white around her champagne flute, the blushing bride suddenly fascinated by peas. Then, at the very back of the room, half hidden behind a pillar, I found Aunt Grace. She was sitting alone at a corner table, her napkin clutched in her lap, and she did the only thing anyone in that room had done for me all night. She nodded, small, firm, a single word written across her face, "Go." I turned and walked toward the double doors. My heels hit the hardwood floor, click, click, click. The only sound in a room of 150 people. Every step felt like a mile. Every step felt like freedom. I pushed the doors open. Evening air rushed in, cool against the blood on my lip. Sika's humming. The last light of sunset streaking the sky orange and purple above the estate's oak trees. And parked at the bottom of the stone steps, engine idling, a black limousine. The rear door opened. Slowly, a woman stepped out. Silver white hair cut sharp at the jaw, a black, tailored suit, a leather clutch. She moved with the kind of authority that doesn't need to announce itself. She looked at me first, then she looked past me through the open doors, straight into the reception hall, and I watched the color drain from my father's face. I need to catch my breath here because when I saw who stepped out of that car, my legs almost gave out. Not from fear, from relief. If you've ever had someone show up for you at the exact moment you thought you were completely alone, you know what that feels like. Subscribe if you want to see how this ends. Because my father, he had about 30 seconds before his entire world flipped upside down. Eleanor Whitmore, 68 years old, estate attorney, founding partner of Whitmore and Pace, and for 40 years my grandmother, Margaret's closest friend and most trusted advisor. She walked toward me with quick, precise steps, her heels barely making a sound on the flagstone. When she reached me, she stopped. Her eyes moved to the blood at the corner of my mouth. Her expression didn't change, but her hand, the one holding the clutch, tightened. "Are you all right, sweetheart?" I nodded. My throat was too tight to speak. "Good." She touched my shoulder. Brief, firm. "Margaret asked me to watch over you. I'm sorry I'm late." Behind me, I could hear the murmur rising inside the hall, chairs scraping, people craning their necks toward the open doors. Aunt Grace appeared in the doorway. She and Eleanor exchanged a look that carried decades of shared understanding. Grace stepped aside, and Eleanor walked into the reception hall like she was entering a courtroom. The murmurs died instantly. Some of the older guests recognized her. In a town this size, Eleanor Whitmore was a name people knew. She'd handled estates, trusts, and property transactions for half the families in the county. Her reputation was immaculate. My father stood near the head table, his face slack. He knew exactly who she was. He'd called her office 3 times trying to change my grandmother's trust. 3 times she'd said no. Eleanor surveyed the room, the fairy lights, the white tablecloths, the champagne, the frozen expressions. She set her clutch on the nearest table, adjusted her jacket, and spoke clearly enough for every person in that hall to hear. Good evening, everyone. I apologize for the interruption, but I believe some facts need correcting. My father's hand gripped the back of a chair so hard his knuckles went white. Eleanor didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. The room was hers the moment she opened her mouth. My name is Eleanor Whitmore. I am the founding partner of Whitmore and Pace. I was Margaret Sinclair's attorney and closest friend for over 40 years. I drafted her living trust myself. Every page, every clause, every designation, she paused. Let the weight of that settle across the room like a heavy cloth. A few guests shifted in their seats. Others leaned forward. The penthouse located at 412 Harrove Boulevard was placed in Athena Sinclair's name and Athena's name alone. This was Margaret's explicit, documented, and legally binding wish. There is no ambiguity. There is no loophole. There is no version of this arrangement that includes a transfer to anyone else. Margaret was clear minded, fully competent, and she signed the trust document in the presence of two independent witnesses. The room was absolutely still, not the silence of agreement, the silence of 150 people realizing all at once that they'd been told a very different story, that the narrative they'd built their judgment on, the Grady daughter hoarding wealth, was a fabrication. Eleanor turned to my father. Her voice didn't harden. It didn't need to. It was already surgical. Mr. Sinclair, you contacted my office 3 times in the last year of your mother's life, requesting that I modify the trust document. Each time I consulted directly with Margaret, each time she confirmed her decision without hesitation. The penthouse goes to Athena. She was clear, she was competent, and she was unwavering. Whispers crawled through the tables like wildfire through dry grass. Heads turned. I saw my Aunt Diane press her hand to her chest, her face draining of color. My cousin Paul set down his champagne glass and stared at the tablecloth. The woman at table 9 who'd mouthed how generous 20 minutes ago now looked like she wanted to disappear into her chair. The people who had sent me those text messages, the ones who called me selfish, greedy, shameful, were hearing the truth for the first time, and every one of them knew that everyone else in the room was hearing it too. This is a private family matter, my father said. His voice cracked on the last word. He was gripping the back of a chair with both hands now. Eleanor looked at him with the calm precision of someone who has spent 4 decades dealing with people exactly like him. People who confuse volume with authority and manipulation with love. You made it public when you announced it to this room, sir. Someone at the back of the room exhaled audibly, a kind of collective breath that seemed to carry the weight of everything that had just shifted. Eleanor wasn't finished. I also want to share something for the benefit of this family, she said. Same tone, same steady composure. Margaret kept meticulous financial records throughout her life. I have copies as her attorney, and I reviewed them thoroughly after her passing. My father's face was gray now. The confident patriarch from 20 minutes ago had vanished. In his place stood a man who looked like the floor was opening beneath him. Over the past 15 years, Margaret provided her son Richard with financial support totaling over $80,000. Documented, dated, not $1 repaid. The room didn't gasp. It was worse than a gasp. It was a slow, collective reckoning. Chairs creaked as people leaned forward. My Aunt Diane covered her mouth. Two of my father's friends from the hardware store exchanged a look I can only describe as, "Oh no, that was a gift," my father said quickly. Too quickly. Those were gifts from my mother. Margaret's personal notes indicate otherwise. Eleanor didn't blink. The word she consistently used was loan. Her records are clear. I'm happy to provide copies to any family member who wishes to verify. The room shifted. I could feel it like tectonic plates moving beneath the building. All those text messages, all those accusations about me being greedy and selfish were crumbling in real time. My mother sat motionless. The tears had stopped. Her face was blank. Not the blankness of calm, but of someone whose entire narrative had just been gutted. Brooks stared straight ahead. Derek, the groom, had quietly moved to the far end of the het, his hands in his pockets, his jaw set. My father tried one more time. You have no right to come here, and I have every right, Eleanor said. Margaret gave it to me. The room was still buzzing with whispers when I stepped back inside. Eleanor stood to my left. Aunt Grace had moved to stand just behind us, arms folded across her chest, steady as a stone wall. 3 women, 3 generations of loyalty to Margaret Sinclair's memory. I didn't take the microphone. I didn't need to project or perform. The room was already listening, hanging on every word, every shift of weight, every breath. I love my grandmother more than anyone in this room, I said. My voice was calm, not cold. Calm. There's a difference. She left me that penthouse because she trusted me. Not because I asked for it, not because I schemed for it, not because I maneuvered or manipulated, because for 3 years I was the one who showed up. Every weekend, every holiday, every time she needed someone to sit with her, to listen to her stories, to remind her that she mattered. I paused. Let that settle. She mattered to me every single day. A few guests nodded slowly. The woman at table 4, someone's grandmother, silver haired, leaning on a cane, wiped her eye with the back of her hand. I'm not giving the penthouse away. Not today. Not ever. And I need every person in this room to hear that clearly. This isn't about greed. This is about honoring the wishes of a woman who earned every square foot of that home with her own 2 hands. I turned to my father. He was leaning on the back of a chair like it was the only thing holding him upright. His face was a landscape of collapsed authority. Dad, if you ever raise your hand to me again, I will file a police report. That's not a threat. That's a boundary. His mouth moved. Nothing came out. I looked at Brooke. She was still sitting, still silent, the wedding dress pulled around her chair like something deflated. Brooke, I wish you a happy marriage. I mean that sincerely, but your happiness doesn't get to come at the cost of mine. That's not how love works. That's not how family works. She didn't respond. Her eyes were glassy, but whether from tears or shock or something else entirely, I couldn't tell. I picked up my clutch, turned to Eleanor and Aunt Grace. Let's go. We walked out together. 3 women shoulder to shoulder, heels clicking on hardwood. The evening air was cool and clean against my skin. The limousine door was still open, golden light spilling from the interior. The driver stood beside it, hands folded, waiting. Aunt Grace got in first, then Eleanor, then me. The door closed, the engine hummed, and we pulled away from Whitfield Estate without looking back. The limousine was quiet, leather seats, tinted windows, the kind of silence that comes after something irreversible. For the first 2 minutes, none of us spoke. I stared at the dark glass and watched the lights of Whitfield Estate shrink behind us. The fairy lights, the garden arches, the string quartet that had probably started playing again by now. Then the tears came, not the polite kind, not the kind that look good on camera, the ugly kind, the kind that come from a place so deep you didn't even know it existed until it breaks open. I cried for my grandmother. I cried for the family I'd spent my whole life trying to earn. I cried because 150 people watched my father hit me, and not one of them stood up. Eleanor reached into her clutch and pulled out a linen handkerchief, pressed it into my hand without a word. Your grandmother would be so proud of you, she said quietly. Aunt Grace took my hand and held it. Her palm was warm and rough, a teacher's hand. I should have spoken up sooner, Athena, years ago. I'm sorry, you showed up, I said. That's enough. Eleanor leaned back in her seat and closed her eyes for a moment. When she opened them, she said, Margaret told me something a few months before she passed. She said, if Richard ever tries to take the penthouse, you go and you protect my girl. I gave her my word. She paused. She also wanted you to know. She set aside $15,000 in a separate savings account for Brooke. She loved both her granddaughters, but Richard never told Brooke about it. He kept that information to himself. I stared at her. Brooke has no idea. None. The limousine turned onto the highway and the estate disappeared behind the trees. By midnight, my phone had 47 notifications. The first wave came from people at the wedding, relatives who'd heard Eleanor speak, friends of the family who'd watched my father slap me in HD clarity under the reception hall lights. My Aunt Diane, the same woman who texted me that Grandma would be ashamed, sent a message at 11:14 p.m. I had no idea about your father's debts, Athena. I'm sorry I judged you. I should have asked questions before I took sides. My cousin Paul, I feel sick about the things I said. You didn't deserve any of this. 3 other relatives sent variations of the same apology. Careful. Embarrassed. The tone of people who realized they were part of something ugly without knowing the full picture. My father called 7 times. I didn't answer, not once. My mother sent one long text. I'll spare you most of it, but here's the essence. How could you humiliate your father like that? How could you bring a stranger to your sister's wedding? You've destroyed this family. Same playbook, different Finday, still the victim. Brooke didn't reach out, neither did Derek. Radio silence from the newlyweds, the one that made me sit up straight. The one that changed everything I thought I understood, came from a number I didn't recognize. A man named Gerald Cross, one of my father's oldest friends, a retired contractor who'd been seated at table 9 during the reception. Athena, I don't know if you remember me. I sat at table 9 tonight. Your father approached me last year, asking me to invest in a family project. He showed me a photo of the penthouse, your penthouse, said it was going to be his to sell by spring, asked for 50,000. I nearly wrote the check. After what I heard tonight, I'm glad I didn't. I'm sorry. I read the message 3 times. Each time the words rearranged my understanding of the past 6 months. My father hadn't just wanted to give the penthouse to Brooke as a wedding gift. That was the cover story, the fairy tale for the reception speech. The truth was simpler and uglier. He'd been planning to sell it to pay off his debts to save his failing business. And the wedding, Brooke's wedding, my sister's most important day, was just the mechanism, the public stage where he'd pressure me into surrendering the deed. In a town this size, secrets don't stay secret for long, especially not the kind that unfold in front of 150 witnesses under fairy lights. By Monday morning, the story had traveled through every coffee shop, hair salon, and church lobby in a 20m radius. Not my version, not my father's version, just the facts that couldn't be denied. A father slapped his daughter at a wedding. An attorney showed up and exposed his lies. The whole thing happened in front of half the county. My father's hardware store had already been struggling. In the weeks that followed, it got worse. Two small contractors who'd been loyal customers for years quietly shifted their accounts to the chain store on Route 9. They didn't make a scene. They just stopped showing up. The church was less subtle. The pastor called my father in for a private conversation. By Thursday, he'd been asked to step down from his role as deacon. The official reason was a period of personal reflection. Everyone knew the real one. My mother stopped attending her weekly yoga class. She told Aunt Grace it was because of her back. But Grace said she'd heard from the instructor that Vivian simply couldn't handle the looks. People stare at me like I'm a monster, she told the instructor. I didn't do anything. I didn't celebrate any of this. I want to be clear about that. I didn't post about it. I didn't gloat. I didn't tell a single person. I told you so. The thing about consequences is, when they're real, you don't have to deliver them yourself. They arrive on their own schedule, carried by the simple, relentless weight of the truth. I didn't destroy my father's reputation. He did that himself in front of 150 witnesses. 2 weeks after the wedding, Brooke called. I was sitting on the penthouse balcony, drinking Earl Grey, Grandma's blend, when her name appeared on my screen. I let it ring 3 times before I picked up Athena. Her voice was flatter than I expected. Not angry, not sweet, just tired. Hi, Brooke. A pause. Then did Grandma really leave me $15,000? So that's why she called. Eleanor had contacted Brooke's attorney to formalize the transfer of the savings account, the one my father had never mentioned. Yes, she did. Another pause, longer this time. I could hear her breathing. Why didn't Dad tell me? You'll have to ask him that, Brooke. Silence. I wanted to say more. I wanted to ask her if she knew about the slap before it happened. If she'd known about Dad's announcement, if she'd sat in on any of those planning conversations over the past 3 months while I was being isolated and condemned. But I didn't, because some questions you're not ready to hear the answers to. Athena, she said finally. I didn't know he was going to hit you. I swear I didn't. I stared at the skyline. The sun was setting. Orange light poured across the balcony the same way it used to when Grandma and I sat here. Okay, I said. That was all I could give her right now. Not forgiveness, not accusation, just acknowledgement that she'd said the words. She waited for more. I didn't offer it. Bye, Athena. Bye, Brooke. I hope your marriage brings you everything you need. I hung up, set the phone down on the railing, took a sip of tea. I wasn't ready to rebuild that bridge. But the foundation had to come from her side this time, not mine. A month passed. I sat at my desk in the penthouse one Sunday morning, the same desk where Grandma used to do her bookkeeping, and opened a blank email. I typed my parents' addresses in the to fields. I chose email deliberately, not a phone call, not a visit. I needed my words to be precise, and I needed them in writing. No room for misinterpretation. No room for tears to rewrite the conversation. Mom, Dad, I love you both. I want you to know that. But love does not mean I allow myself to be hit, lied about, or manipulated. Those 3 things happened at Brooke's wedding, and each one was a choice you made. If you want a relationship with me going forward, it begins with an honest conversation. Not about the penthouse, not about money, about respect, about telling the truth, about treating me like your daughter and not a problem to be managed. Until that conversation happens, I need space. That's not a punishment, it's a necessity. I can't heal in the same environment that hurt me. I'm not asking you to be perfect, I'm asking you to be honest. Your daughter, Athena. I read it 3 times, checked every word, then I hit send. My father replied the next day, 2 sentences. You've always been dramatic. Call us when you're done with your tantrum. My mother replied with 4 paragraphs. I read the first line. After everything we've sacrificed for you, and closed the email, I set my phone on the desk, walked to the kitchen, made coffee, stood at the window, and looked out at the city. On the bookshelf behind me, Grandma's photo caught the morning light, her grin, her keys, her world. I was keeping all of it, her home, her faith in me, and my own peace. Aunt Grace called every Thursday evening at 7, not to push reconciliation, not to relay messages from my parents, just to check in. How's work? She'd ask. Or did you try that pasta recipe I sent? Or I found a photo of Margaret from 1983. She's wearing Rova's case. You need to see this. She never once said you should call your father. She never said family is family. She understood that those words had been weaponized against me, and she wasn't going to add to the arsenal. One Thursday, about 6 weeks after the wedding, she did offer something. Your father is struggling, she said carefully. The store's in trouble. Your mother is going to therapy. First time in her life. I listened. I'm not telling you this so you'll feel bad, Athena. I'm telling you because things are shifting slowly, very slowly. I'm glad Mom's in therapy. I said, I mean that. I know you do. And Dad? Grace paused. He's not there yet. He's still angry. Still blaming everyone but himself. But the ground under him is different now. People aren't backing him up the way they used to. What about Brooke? She's asking questions she's never asked before. That's a start. I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. When they're ready to be honest, I'll listen. But I won't chase them anymore, Aunt Grace. I spent my whole life chasing. I know, honey. Her voice softened. The door doesn't have to be locked forever, but the key is yours. You decide when and if you use it. That same week, Eleanor called. Her voice was warm and direct, the way it always was. Margaret would want you to live in that penthouse. Athena, really live in it. Make it yours. Fill it with your life. So, I started redecorating. I kept Grandma's bookshelf, her teacups, her photo on the balcony wall, and I added my own things beside them. I want to talk to you directly now, just you and me. I used to believe being a good daughter meant saying yes to everything. If my parents needed something, I gave it. If they dismissed me, I stayed. If they chose my sister, I smiled and pretended it didn't sting. I thought that was love. It wasn't. It was a transaction, one where I kept paying and they kept raising the price. Grandmother was the one who taught me the difference. She never once asked me to earn her love. She gave it freely and expected only one thing in return, that I'd respect myself enough to keep it. A boundary isn't a wall, it's a door with a lock. You choose who gets a key, and you're allowed to change the locks whenever you need to. I'm not telling you to cut off your family. That's your decision, not mine. Every family is different, every situation has its own weight, but I am telling you this. If someone hits you with their hand or with their words, you have the right to walk out. You have the right to protect what's yours. And you don't owe anyone an explanation for choosing yourself. My father slapped me in front of 150 people, and the thing that changed my life wasn't the slap, it was what I did next. I stood up, I wiped the blood, and I walked out that door. I'm standing on the balcony now, the same one where Grandma and I drank tea. The city lights are coming on one by one, like someone's turning on the stars from below. The air is warm, the tea is good, and this penthouse, this home is mine. Grandma, I kept our home and I kept myself, so that's my story, and I have a question for you. If you were in my shoes, standing in that ballroom with blood on your lip and 150 silent faces staring back at you, would you have walked out or would you have stayed? Drop your answer in the comments. I read every single one. And if this story reminded you that your boundaries matter, hit subscribe. I post stories like this every week. Check the description for another one I think you'll love. Thank you for listening. Really, it means